Welcome back to another episode of With Sonar. We're here live at the Future of Supply Chain here in Cleveland, Ohio. It's day 2, June 22nd. We had a great lineup yesterday, and of course, we've got a lot more, a full day here planned in Cleveland on this Thursday. Beautiful day. Of course, hopefully you're enjoying the city, and if you're at home streaming the show, we hope you enjoyed the content. Tony, glad to have you here. Tony, you might be giving some people a little whiplash at home. You just came over from the big stage. Now you're over here on the small stage with me.
Hey, it keeps my morning busy, right? Yesterday, registration went off without a hitch, so now I get to do the fun media side of everything. So it's been a fun time. First time in Cleveland. I'll be back.
It was a good time, and the people want to hear what you have to say. But also, we're joined by a very special guest today. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. So we've got Andrew Banfield. He is the Director of Transportation for L'Oreal, small little startup. So glad you were able to make it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Andrew, we've only got, it's not a long time. We've only got about 25 minutes here, and we want to talk today. Yesterday Craig gave a presentation on index-linked contracts and the problems it solves. So we're gonna walk into that a little bit, hear about it from your perspective. But before we even get there, I want to hear. You've been in transportation a while. You've been supporting L'Oreal now in their transportation services for a bit. Walk us through how did you even get into the industry? Like where did you start?
Sure. So starting out, I was a psych undergrad. As you can imagine, behavioral sciences. Perfect fit for transportation, as most people know. You get into transportation not because you went to school for it, but because you fall in love with it. And that's what happened with me. I had a buddy working at C.H. Robinson, met up with me over a couple beers one night, and said, man, you got to check this out. You'd be great at it. And it was great. I enjoyed it. I started out as carrier sales out of Columbus, Ohio. Worked for a couple of really great people. Scott Norris was a fantastic GM there, and the guy that I'm talking about who really got me into the industry, Bo Morphing, was a fantastic mentor to get started. And then I actually left Robinson, had a really good opportunity to go to a much smaller boutique temp control LTL company. We had our own assets, so definitely a very different feel. We only had about 88 drivers at the time. So very different feel from big C.H. Robinson, everybody knew the name, to small FST. But where we were really strong. I mean, I think they're still very strong today, to be honest. Don't work with them anymore, but that was a really good experience. Then I had the opportunity to leave there and go to start up the North American Transportation Brokerage for DHL. Myself and 2 other guys started that up, and talk about being strapped to the front of a rocket. It was wild. DHL, big global conglomerate. I mean, it was wild. So a lot of fun, met a lot of really great people, worked with a lot of really great people. Dave Kiesling, who's wandering around here somewhere, fantastic mentor from that location. And then my wife and I decided that we wanted to kind of move around a little bit, and found a role also with DHL, but in their procurement team, the GBS team down in Plantation, Florida, working for a fellow by the name of Tim Doherty. Good dude. Was able to have a really good time there. Great experience working in the sourcing side of things as opposed to just the operations, the day-to-day. So that gave me a lot of really good experience, contract negotiation, that sort of thing. One day my wife came home, said, you know what, Florida's not for me. I want to be closer to family and friends. I live by the mantra, happy wife, happy life. So very, very quickly, we found our way back up north. I actually had a really great opportunity to go work for L'Oreal and jump in as a transportation expert supporting sourcing. I joined the logistics and industrial services category for us. We didn't have our own transportation category at the time, but I was able to, over the course of the next year and a half or so, build out the value behind that and put forward a business case to where we built one. We've now continued to expand that across the globe and show folks the value within L'Oreal in particular, the value of transportation expertise and really having an ownership within that sourcing space, which was fantastic. And then doing one of the most core tenets to L'Oreal, which is eat what you cook. I was able to transition back into our operations side of things, and that's exactly what I'm doing now, working with the team of vendors and carriers that I helped put into place over the last few years. So it's been a great experience.
That's great. I'm sure you've seen so many pieces of the industry. You've seen tons of different cycles. I'm sure a lot of valuable experience. Happy wife, happy life. Very very good. Something we can probably all learn here. I'm curious too, though. Something that you mentioned, kind of coming in now to L'Oreal and supporting their transportation pieces and logistics. Charles at Halliburton mentioned this yesterday, and that it's important for folks in these roles to go to leadership and kind of explain the value. They need a seat at the table. Over the last few years, and I guess the volatility that we've had coming out of COVID, has that changed at all how L'Oreal has thought about logistics? Is it a more cohesive conversation with different departments? Has it changed, or has it always been that way?
Oh, it's certainly changed quite a bit. Our leadership has done a tremendous job leaning in more and more. And understanding more about supply chain, which has been great to see. We've got a couple of really strong leaders in our supply chain group, not just transportation, but physical distribution and across the gambit. So it's great to see that we've continued to learn a heck of a lot more and really, and I'll use this as a plug, I guess, but FreightWaves has been a huge part of that in helping us to be able to share relevant market data. I mean, it's one thing to be able to share, oh yeah, well I saw this in this pricing data from so-and-so, but knowing how to put that into context has been such a big opportunity for us. We've really been able to make a big impact in helping to educate senior leadership with that. And so it's definitely changed quite a bit. And I mentioned yesterday to quite a few folks that you can never let a good disaster go to waste. And with the some of the challenges in the market that we've seen, that 17 to 18 swing, and then with COVID, that's what people really need to be focused on. Is there's going to be swings in the market. It's going to happen, right? We're getting ready for another one here before too long right now. And so as we're preparing for that, make sure that you're educating your leadership, educating your colleagues, educating the various partners that you're working with, because things are going to turn and you want to be ready for it. And people are always talking about how, well, I don't have a crystal ball. You don't need one. It's not magic. It's the way the world works. It's the cycle of our network and of transportation and of supply chain in general. So just have your eyes open and be ready for it.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you mentioned it, you talked about how everything's really changed in reliance on data, but you've been in the industry a long time at a lot of various different places. How's the data itself changed? Is it just, it's easy, more widely available? Is it just cleaner? Is it not so siloed with, are you having more aggregation across the entire industry as opposed to just what you have in-house?
Yeah, so that's a good one as far as understanding the real change in the data itself. There's been a ton of change in quantity of data as well as quality. It's a lot easier to get clean data now. I mean, you've got a lot of great technology companies out there that, they'll come in and cleanse your data for you if you need it, So, and a lot of really smart people who are now learning more about how to do that. 10, 15 years ago, analytics was a new term and people didn't really know what that meant and how they could interact with it. And now we're talking machine learning and AI and so it's definitely been a big swing and not something that I expected would occur in the transportation space as fast as it has. Unfortunately, I'd like it to be certainly a lot faster. There's still some stuff that we could certainly do better, but we're doing a heck of a lot better now than we were just a few short years ago.
One thing we've been talking a lot about, right, kind of along this side of data, right, and we talk about indexing and a lot of data now coming into the market. It's possible to have the conversation around index link contracts, at least for this industry. It's existed in other industries for decades, but now it seems like that the data is becoming more accessible. I guess in your opinion, Andrew, when we talk about index link contracts for the logistics space, what problem does that actually solve?
So linking to an index creates an opportunity for some companies. not for all companies. Now for, let's say a large CPG company, use any example that you really want, where you have a lot of consistency in lanes, you have a lot of consistency in origins, destinations from the lane perspective. And if you really dig into that, the only thing that's going to change for those is the cost. And that's changing because of the market. Well, if I can trail the market and be closer to that market rate for my vendors, my carriers, then they're going to have a much easier time keeping up with those swings and making sure that they're staying sustainable. Because, if you're talking, depending on the carrier you're talking to, even some of the bigger folks out there, you're talking 40 to 60% of their network is spot. Well, that's 100% relying on market changes. Well, how can I, as somebody who wants to lock in contract rates long term, make sure that I'm not going to put an imbalance on them? One direction might drop by 20 or 30% because of a market swing. And if I'm shipping the other direction, if I'm not helping them to recover that somehow, they're not going to be able to haul my freight profitably, and the contract's going to break down. I'm going to see a reduction in primary carrier acceptance, tender acceptance. I'm going to see a reduction in service. And for me, service is number one. That's our number one priority.
I think that leads into a great point. I mean, you talk, what are the challenges? I mean, obviously L'Oreal is a big CPG company, and the challenges, it's not just L'Oreal, but I think they're industry-wide, right? So it's, how does it, when you factor in these challenges, right, that, and what index-linked contracts can help do, right, improve those service levels, make sure that your carrier partners are, it's more like a partnership. They're not feeling like they're getting, in one half of the market, they're feeling like they're getting kind of screwed over, but when the market turns, they're reaping all the rewards. So it's so what are the overall challenges that you face when you see these, and maybe have to have conversations about maybe implementing, or at least starting the conversation about implementing index-linked contracts?
Sure. So the internal conversation changes when you can educate folks on why it shouldn't be an us versus them mentality. Yep. That polarizing mentality, that's what creates these huge swings in the market, right? They continue to swing larger and larger from the peaks to the valleys than what they've been doing, and only at a slightly faster frequency than what it's been happening historically. And the faster that you can get your leadership, your company, the organization bought in and understanding that it's not a one-way street, that it doesn't just go carrier gets paid, now we get paid when it's an up market or a down market. It's not about saving money or making money. It's paying a fair market rate for a fair market service. And a lot of folks talk about, can we commoditize transportation? And I think it's a very interesting conversation, because you're asking if we can commoditize a service, not just service from a perspective of performance and when it comes to on-time delivery, but service when it comes to you have somebody who's doing a job and working their tail off to make sure that that product's getting delivered on time to the right location, minimizing damages along the way. It's work. And if you were to say, and I mentioned this yesterday in a conversation, if you were to say that we can commoditize transportation, I would argue to say, well, if that's the case, you can also commoditize being a server in a restaurant or being a masseuse, right? Those types of things that are very service focused. And maybe we can at some point, but I don't think we're there yet. And so I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge and an opportunity for us all to be able to get our minds wrapped around, for sure.
Where does, as we continue this conversation, right, and data continues to get better, right? It's only going to get better. And you mentioned this earlier too, on bringing some of that context to leadership, even, right? When we have these conversations as to whether something like indexing is even the right path to go with a company, right? Maybe with another company it isn't. But in either way, what are the challenges that maybe leadership within organizations that aren't as in the weeds with transportation and logistics, what challenges can data help solve or help explain for them that folks should be thinking about?
It explains everything when it comes to supply chain. I mean, it's so basic, and yet it's so foreign to so many people. If you're in the industry, if you're in the supply chain industry, it is so straightforward. I look at certain metrics, I measure them every day. On-time delivery, performance when it comes to tender acceptance. I look at our carriers adhering to our EDI requirements or our real-time tracking requirements, things of that nature. Those are so in my face and so impactful every single day. But I know dozens, if not hundreds of people in leadership, not at my organization specifically, but at many organizations who have no idea what those metrics even are. Organizations like FreightWaves and the others out there have the opportunity to start to market to them as well. I think that's going to be a really good opportunity for you folks in the future to help educating them and providing us more and more information to educate other executives at that level, because it's foreign to them today to look at PCA or primary carrier acceptance and say, yeah, that's valuable or not. But to me, it's everything. The ability to see that data, consume it, and understand this carrier is a valid and valuable member of our team, or they're not. And we'll need to cut that tail at some point. Maybe not sooner, but at some point it's going to happen. And helping leadership understand again that it's not just an us versus them, our company versus the carrier's mentality, but it has to be a partnership in the long term. It's just like an employee, right? If the employee's good, you want to boost them up. You want to build them up. And if an employee's not good, you either want to coach them up, or you've got to help them find another opportunity somewhere else. Maybe not with your company, because you're not doing them any favors keeping them on board if they're not a good fit.
Yeah, and I mean, it's talking to this leadership, and you mentioned it, and you think about it from a shipper's perspective, right? I mean, ultimately, the goal is to get goods from point A to point B. Like, from a shipper's perspective, you're not making money until something sells, right?
That's right.
And transportation is just the kind of that arm that gets it there, and you just don't want that arm to break. And I look at it, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but when you think about that, having that conversation, like leadership maybe didn't focus on it when it wasn't broken, and now it seems like you deal with COVID, and COVID happens, and not just one arm breaks, but everybody's arm breaks at the same time. Like, how does it make that conversation easier now that, hey, this is much more important? It's always been important, but now they at least they feel it, or they saw it from the top down as opposed to maybe in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I go back to the mantra of don't let a good disaster go to waste.
Yeah.
It's so important to make sure that you take advantage of picking your battles. I'm not going to die on every hill because it's not worth it. But I will fight tooth and nail when it matters, when it's the right decision for the right reasons. And that's what folks need to be taking the time and doing the work, doing the diligence, doing the research with organizations like yourselves, understanding the market, where it's going, where it's come from, in order to be able to make sure that they're tackling it when it's appropriate. Because that is everything. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of appropriate and inappropriate.
I want to ask you something here, Andrew. We were joking around yesterday a little bit, and I had asked you when you became a customer of SONAR. I was like, you explicitly told me that nobody sold you SONAR. You came and bought it. You saw the value from the outside looking in. There was nobody who influenced you to buy it. What was so two-part question. Part one. What did you see as the value kind of outside looking in, and now having kind of the experience with it and how it's changed? What are the unintended consequences or maybe benefits that you weren't aware of initially going in?
Yeah, so it was not a sold decision. I'll throw that out there first of all. But Between myself, when I was still leading the sourcing team for transportation, and Adam Hall, the fellow who leads our entire transportation function, working together and seeing the data and the information and the marketplace relevant just context that existed within FreightWaves and SONAR, and the information you guys are putting out on a regular basis, and having access to the regular ability to pull up any chart that I want to pull up. And it does take a little bit of time to get used to how those work and how to leverage them most effectively. But being able to gather that information quickly and efficiently in order to be able to drop into a deck to educate other folks in my company and in leadership, or even colleagues who are asking questions from other companies. It's there, and if you look at it, if you take the time to invest your work, because I work because I have a life. I want to make sure that work that I'm putting forward is delivering the outcome that I want, so I can continue to pursue my career. And if you're looking at the right pathway, it's not a matter, again, of appropriate or of right and wrong. It's a matter of appropriate and inappropriate. It was the appropriate thing to do, to find a resource that was valuable and that would provide that regular, at your fingertips, market relevant data. And I don't know of another one that's out there that's doing the same thing that you folks are.
We talk a lot about, data, right? Obviously, we're a data company. There's a lot of data out there that's becoming more and more available to the industry, right? What is, and we talk about providing context to leadership. What is a problem right now that is either in your world or in the industry that maybe data isn't solving, that needs, basically the industry would benefit from solving at some point with data?
I appreciate that question. And the reason I appreciate it is because I've mentioned it to a few folks already, but service is king. Cost is one thing. Seeing, PCA and primary tender acceptance, that's another. But on-time delivery. If I pay X amount on this lane from, let's say, Chicago to Charlotte, if I pay $1,000 on that lane, what is my confidence that I'm going to be there on time every time? Now, what if I were to pay $1,500? What about $2,000? What about $20,000? What is my anticipated service based on what I'm willing to pay in the marketplace, and how can I get visibility to that upstream, and how can my carriers get visibility to that downstream, so they understand that, yeah, I may ask for a premium service, but I'm also willing to pay for that good service, because as mentioned earlier, if I don't have that product on the shelf, if I'm not able to sell that to our end customers and consumers, I haven't done my job.
And I think that's a great point. I think that's where, and I think this is where that index link contracts come into it, right? Where you start to know that, hey, I'll help you and maybe pay a premium to the index, but I'm expecting the service levels to be elite, right? And that premium. So, and if that's visible, you know what the index is, and you know what that premium is, I think it allows those conversations to advance and the service levels to stick there. At least on the surface, that's the way it appears.
So it's a really good point, and one thing that I also want to make sure that we mention is that not all methodologies are the same when it comes to index-based contracts. There are some that are based off of the benchmark rate is the awarded rate. No submission of bids, no nothing. It's just, this is the market rate. This is what I'm willing to pay. If the market rate goes up, I'll pay that. If the market rate goes down, I'll pay that. True commoditization at a certain degree. On the flip side, there are others that are based off of an awarded negotiated rate up front and then trail the index based on percentage increase, percentage decrease. There's various different hybrid models you can certainly go after within that. Believe me, I put a lot of thought into it. We've done a lot of work around it. And I also want to clarify, not all of our business falls into that model. And it wouldn't and shouldn't go into that model in the future. But there's a significant portion that does. It's the right fit for us. And for companies out there that have a lot of consistent business and they want to make sure that they're really driving a reliable, cost-confident budget number, this is a way to get a heck of a lot closer to it.
No, that's great. Thank you for your time, Andrew. We're getting close here towards the end of time. Tony, of course, always a pleasure to have you. We've got a lot more content coming up here, both on the main stage as well as here on FreightWaves TV. So stay tuned. We're going to take a very short break, and then we'll be right back with some more FreightWaves TV content here live in Cleveland. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you here shortly. That's it for With Sonar. Take care.